Story 1. The Last House on Maple. It was Halloween night and Sarah, a 28-year-old realtor, was conducting a final walkthrough of an empty Victorian house at the end of Maple Street. As the newest agent at her firm, she'd gotten stuck with the late appointment. Though she didn't mind missing the usual holiday festivities, the house had been on the market for months, its price dropping steadily. Sarah moved methodically through the rooms, taking photos and notes on her tablet. The old hardwood floors creaked beneath her feet, and the autumn wind whistled through the weathered window frames. While checking the upstairs bathroom, she noticed her breath suddenly becoming visible in the air. The temperature had dropped dramatically, though she hadn't heard the ancient heating system shut off. The shadows in the hallway seemed to shift and elongate as she walked, and her tablet's screen began flickering erratically. She told herself it was just low battery, but then all the photos she'd taken started disappearing, one by one. A door slammed somewhere downstairs, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized her phone had no signal. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, but when she peered into the hallway, there was nobody there, just her own reflection in an antique mirror at the end of the hall. Then, her reflection smiled and waved. She ran for the stairs, but each step seemed to stretch longer than the last. The front door kept getting further away as she ran toward it. Behind her, she heard her own voice calling her name, getting closer. She fumbled with the lockbox, finally getting the door open and bursting outside. The next day, another agent found Sarah's tablet on the front porch, its screen displaying a single photo. Sarah herself, standing in the upstairs hallway, waving at the camera with an unnatural smile. Story 2. Trick or Treat. Mike was working the late shift at the 24-hour convenience store on Halloween, enjoying the parade of costumed customers that trickled in as the night grew later. The small store sat on the edge of town, its fluorescent lights creating a bright island in the darkness. He'd been there 3 years and knew most of the regulars. Between customers, he restocked shelves and watched Halloween specials on his phone. Around midnight, the bell above the door chimed, but when he looked up, nobody entered. The security camera feed on the monitor behind the counter showed static for a split second before returning to normal. He noticed small wet footprints appearing on the floor, one by one, as if made by invisible feet. The footprints moved down the aisles, stopping at the candy section. Bags of candy began falling off the shelves, but instead of hitting the floor, they hung suspended in midair. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the lights flickered. Mike heard the giggling of children, but the store was empty. The suspended candy bags began floating toward the counter, accompanied by the sound of small feet running. The giggling grew louder, and Mike felt tiny, ice-cold hands grabbing at his clothes. The door chimed again, and the bags dropped to the floor. Mike scrambled for the door, but it wouldn't open. The giggles turned to screams, and the lights went out completely. When they came back on seconds later, the store was filled with transparent children in decades-old Halloween costumes, all reaching for him with ghostly hands. The morning shift found the store perfectly ordered, except for empty candy wrappers scattered everywhere, and Mike's name tag lying in the middle of a small puddle of water. Story 3. The Halloween Filter. Emily was scrolling through social media on Halloween night, trying out different seasonal filters on her phone. Living alone in her studio apartment, she'd opted for a quiet evening in rather than joining the parties downtown. She found a new filter called Halloween Spirit and activated it. The filter showed ghostly figures dancing in the background of her selfies, which she found amusing. She took several photos, enjoying the spooky effects. Reviewing the photos, she noticed one of the ghost figures appeared in the same spot in every shot, getting closer to her each time. Unlike the other transparent figures, this one seemed more solid, more real. She switched cameras to check behind her but saw nothing. When she returned to selfie mode, the figure was much closer, its face now clearly visible and horrifyingly familiar. It was her own face, but decomposed and grinning. She deleted the app, but the figure remained on her screen, now moving independently of the camera. Her phone began opening apps on its own, sending messages to her contacts. "Coming to join you soon." The screen turned ice cold in her hands. In her bathroom mirror, she saw the decomposed version of herself standing behind her, reaching for her neck. She ran for her apartment door, but her phone screen flashed a blinding light. When her vision cleared, she was looking at herself through her phone screen, watching as her real self fled the apartment. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was now just another filter effect, forever trapped in the digital world. Story 4. The Pumpkin Patch. David volunteered to close up the community pumpkin patch on Halloween night, wanting to earn extra credit for his agriculture class. As the last families left with their purchases, he began his final rounds through the sprawling field. The evening fog rolled in thick and fast, unusual for the season. He used his phone's flashlight to check the irrigation systems and make sure all the equipment was secured. The scarecrows cast long shadows in the beam of his light. Moving between the rows, he realized the fog was unusually warm and seemed to pulse with a faint orange glow. The pumpkins around him appeared to be softly humming, creating a low vibration he could feel in his bones. The humming grew louder, and he noticed the pumpkins were slowly rotating in place, their carved faces all turning to watch him pass. The fog thickened until he could barely see a few feet ahead. His phone light began to dim, and the familiar path back to the barn seemed to have changed. Suddenly, the pumpkins began to rise from the ground, hovering at eye level, their carved faces now glowing from within. The humming turned to whispers, speaking words in an ancient language he couldn't understand. The scarecrows stepped down from their posts, straw rustling as they moved. He ran, but the floating pumpkins followed, their whispers growing urgent. The scarecrows circled around him, herding him deeper into the patch. His feet became tangled in vines that seemed to move with purpose, pulling him down into the warm earth. The next morning, there was a new scarecrow in the patch wearing David's clothes, and the pumpkins all wore fresh faces, each one carved with his terrified expression.